Kat, and welcome back to my channel. So this week we are doing another state urban legends video. I haven't done one in a while, I don't think, and it's just been really hard for me to find the energy to do things because it's been interesting. The past couple of weeks have been interesting, and I'm going to be doing a video about what's going on and stuff like that probably for next week, so if you're interested in that, can wait for that. But this week I wanted to do a state urban legends because it's my favorite video to make, or at least it's one of my favorite videos to make because I like all things spooky, urban legend, conspiracy theory For those of you who might not know what that is, it kind of goes without saying, but I'm going to explain it anyway. Basically what I do is I pick a random state out of all 50, and then sorry, a text message popped up and I got distracted. So I just pick a random state out of all 50 states, and then I go on the internet and find at least 2 to 5 of my favorite legends from that state, and then I share them with my fellow creepy people out there who also love urban legends. The reason I like to do that is because I like things all creepy and all interesting, but I also love storytelling, and I love hearing parts of the culture of different states because to me, urban legends kind of show the culture of every state. Each state has a Bermuda Triangle, it has a haunted location, and it has most definitely either a Bigfoot or a lake monster. Every single state does. This time I tried to pick ones that weren't lake monster or Bigfoot related because I always add those in them, which, you know, is it not interesting? It's just kind of repetitive, sort of, kinda. But anyway, let's get started. So this week's video is State Urban Legends, Maine edition. The reason I picked Maine, honestly, is because of Stephen King. Because basically every single one of his every single one of his books is in Maine. You've got Derry in It, and then, of course, naturally, when I'm about to list the things that are written in Maine, I suddenly can't remember, which is great. But also, a lot of horror movies are in Maine. So I wanted to pick it because it's kind of creepy and kind of spooky, and we are going to start to go into spooky season soon, even though it's spooky season all the time for me. But yeah, that's why I picked Maine. Long explanation over with. So the first story, legend, creepy, spooky, ghost kind of story is going to be on the Robbie Andrews haunting. So basically, the Robbie Andrews haunting story is within the Groms campus on the University of Southern Maine. And it is in the Robbie Andrews dormitory, which is the oldest building on campus. It wasn't born. I don't know why when I talk about buildings I say it was born. It was built in the 1800s, and naturally, because it's so old, it has a fair share of hauntings and stories that come with it. One of the stories follows a young girl who hung herself in the tower because she found out she was pregnant. Another story follows another young woman that fell to her death off one of the buildings, or off of the dormitory, basically, in front of a ton of people, and nobody knows, even to this day, if she was pushed, if it was an accident, or if it was a suicide. People that live within the dormitory have said that they've heard voices, that they've seen spirits, and that they also experience a lot of, cold spots. But the creepiest thing to me is that people have said that they've seen a woman in the tower, which, remember, I said someone hung themselves in the tower. People have said they've seen a woman in the tower, and what makes that creepy is that this tower has been closed off for years, and nobody has access to it. So either someone's getting into this tower, nobody knows how, or they're seeing the ghost girl of a woman, who hung herself because she was pregnant, which also super sad. What leads someone to want to do that? Is it because, they're super young and in college, so they don't want to be pregnant, or is there some other crazy reason? Stories like this interest me because universities or colleges are usually pretty old. Especially a lot of the buildings and a lot of the dormitories are kind of old, so they all have different stories, whether it be hauntings or other things going on. And so that's why I find like hotels and hospitals and universities and colleges and campuses some of the most interesting places, because they hold so many stories, especially spooky ones, that are super interesting to me. But also, like, a lot of the stories are very similar. Very similar. Granted, I don't like hospitals in the first place. Nobody likes hospitals. The only time you go to a hospital for a good reason is if someone's being born. Any other time, it's awful. But I found this really interesting because I looked this up even further, and there's like a ton of stories that people have said, not just within the Robbie Andrews dormitory, but just within the whole campus itself. There are stories of just people seeing ghosts and hearing things all the time. So, and of course, naturally, I'm spooky and weird and I like ghost stories, so that kind of thing just makes me interested and also makes me want to like go there. I scrolled down and realized that a lot of my stories are more on the spooky side. They are kind of urban legends, but they're also more like ghost stories. So, yeah, also side note, if you see me looking down at my laptop is right there, and I'm trying to remember some of the stuff that I said, because some of these stories have details, and I'm trying to be a little bit better about remembering details. I don't write scripts for myself because I feel like if I write a script for myself, my reactions or my thoughts aren't as real, but I still want to like have actual information, if that makes any sense. The next story we are going to talk about is the Wood Island Lighthouse haunting. Now, there's so many lighthouse hauntings in Maine. Picking one was very hard for me. Something about me is I love architecture and I love old buildings. I love the history behind it. I love the way that they're built. And lighthouses are super fascinating to me. And so picking one of these is really hard because almost the entire list was about hauntings of lighthouses because I'm crazy. But I picked one. But basically, this lighthouse has a few spooky, scary stories, obviously. What lighthouses do is they help boats see islands so they don't hit islands, basically. That's kind of the same thing, I think, with airplanes, but I'm not sure about the airplanes. But I know they do that with boats. I think they help direct boats to land. But anyway, I digress. This story, in particular, the one that I'm going to talk about, follows a fisherman named Howard Hobbs. So he was just a fisherman on the island. And I believe he maybe was the keeper of the island, but I'm not certain. I did not write that down, so I don't want to say that he was. But anyway, one night he was drinking with a friend and got sufficiently drunk, and his landlord decided to come and tell him that his rent was overdue. Now, in a drunken rage, and of course when you're drunk, you're not really thinking straight, he shot his landlord in the chest and killed him. And then proceeded to go back in and kill himself. Now, when I read this story, I couldn't find any mentions of the person he was drinking with. So it's like, what happened to the person he was drinking with? Did he kill him too, or was it just like this big traumatic experience? But anyway, a lot of keepers from after that happened have reported hearing voices, hearing moanings of like pain and stuff like that, and also seeing unexplained shadows. Now, the light that was originally in the lighthouse was actually removed in 1972, which removed the need for a keeper, because usually a keeper has to maintain the light within the lighthouse. But since they put in an automated light, the keepers weren't really needed anymore. So now the lighthouse is fully automated. So now Hobbs is probably just all alone in this lighthouse, moaning, regretting the decision he made while he was drunk. That has to suck. Like, you're drinking, you get into a drunken stupor, you shoot someone, and then you shoot yourself, and then you have to live for the rest of your eternity with that decision you made, just because your rent was overdue. So I wonder if maybe there was something going on. That tells me that maybe the landlord and him didn't really get on very well, and maybe that was just like his last straw. Maybe he was already suicidal and was drinking to potentially end his life, and then that happened and it kind of just went along with that. But there are other stories, and I really suggest looking them up because they're super interesting, of hauntings at lighthouses, but also at this one. You can actually go to see this lighthouse. You can actually see it, which is, I think, is very, very cool. And I would actually really love to do that, not just to, hear about the stories, but also just to see that the way it was built. You could probably tell how old it is just by looking at it, because I'm a big nerd. So, yeah. This next legend is kind of my favorite, but so is the last one. So they're both my favorites out of the four that I picked. Usually within this, I usually save my favorite legend for last, but this one is actually one of my favorites, so they're both my favorite. But anyway, this is the legend of Colonel Buck's tomb. So, the story is actually kind of sad. It's actually really, really, really sad. But I find it really interesting. So basically, Colonel Jonathan Buck is the founder of Bucksport in Maine. It is said that he fell in love with a woman and he got her pregnant. And in an effort to not get exposed and for no one to find out that he got her pregnant, he forced her to leave. He didn't want her there, so he forced her away. Over the years, she raised their son by herself, and then eventually came back and asked him for more help because she was struggling. And he obviously declined. But in an effort to make it so not only she didn't ask him again, but he wouldn't get exposed, he said that she was a witch and said to burn her. I have a problem with this because he was the one that got her pregnant. He was the one that sent her away. But because of that mistake, he said to burn her. Now the sad part is her son was there and he ran up to her burning body and took her leg because he wanted something of her that he could bury so he can have his own memorial, which is kind of gross but also sad. Now the legend goes that on his tomb, on Colonel Buck's tomb, is a stain in the shape of a leg. And that people have tried to remove this stain over and over again, but no matter how many times they try to remove it, it always comes back. And that it's still there to this day. It said that if you go to his tomb to this day, you'll see a stain that looks like the shape of a leg. Now maybe she was a witch and that was his karma, or the world was like, that's fucked up, here you go. But I think it's really sad that this woman didn't ask for this to happen. She didn't ask to fall in love with him. She didn't ask to get pregnant or have a baby, and neither did her son. But he didn't want his good name to be destroyed by some woman that he had a baby with outside of wedlock, and so he killed her. And not to get all feminist, but back in the day, that really shows the power that a man has. Because if she was just like, no, he got me pregnant, this is what really happened, no one would believe her. They would think she was just a hysterical woman who possibly had a crush on this colonel. And so, of course, they believed him. But the karma that he probably had to live with for the rest of his life and then after, I really hope he had to have some karma. Because you reap what you sow, man. You don't just get to screw around with someone and then decide that that's not your responsibility anymore. The reason this is one of my favorites is because it shows back then, if you were a woman and you did something, even if it wasn't your fault, you would be wrong. And I find that so interesting because now for women, like, it's not as equal as it was, as like it could be, but now if a guy gets a girl pregnant, it's not like he can just be like, no, burn her, because that is like a felony. And it's just, I find it so interesting how things have kind of changed. Not as much as they need to, but they have changed to where that wouldn't fly now. And it's so interesting to think that that was a time in our history where if a woman was strong, if she was outspoken, if she had a talent that wasn't what a woman was supposed to have, she was considered a witch. And I don't know if it's much different now, but it's interesting to think that that was a part of our history, was burning people because they didn't suit what you believed in. And I guess the difference now is skin color and bullets, basically. That if you're different, you're perceived as different and wrong. So honestly, not much has changed, which is very sad. Very sad. Okie dokie, and we have reached the last legend, story, spooky ghost thing that we are talking about today. And this is my favorite because every state has something that has to do with the potential of hell or hauntings. And a lot of the times it's in a cemetery. So you've got I can't remember what state it was, but basically it was stairs that if you walked down all of the stairs, all 13 steps, if you got to the end, you'd go crazy because you'd start to hear hell. There are chairs that if you sat in them, you'd hear hell and lose your mind. Stuff like that, like the underground catacombs in France. People have said that you can hear hell in France if you get deep enough. So each place has something like that. Now this legend doesn't specifically say that, but in a way it implies what it is. So basically this is, and I'm going to say this wrong, the Sabatus Well. So the Sabatus Well is actually located in the back of a cemetery, which I could not figure out what cemetery. So I don't know if this is a real story or not, which is, great because that's kind of what urban legends are. They're stories that could be based on something real. But anyway, the story follows a group of teenagers in a cemetery, and one of the group dared one of their friends to be lowered into the well. Now, of course, they didn't want to be perceived as weak or dumb, so they took the challenge. So they got a tire and a rope, and he got in the tire, and they slowly lowered him down until they couldn't see him. After a while, they brought him back up, and to their shock, it looked as if this boy had aged several years. It said that his hair was white, that his body was shaking, and that he would burst out in hysterical laughter and couldn't speak like actual sentences. He couldn't speak coherently, basically. And it was very apparent that he had lost his mind. Now, of course, this sounds crazy. Like, duh. But this also kind of supports Bermuda Triangle as well, because I said every state has a Bermuda Triangle. So to me, this combines the hell thing and the Bermuda Triangle thing. Because maybe he got lowered into this well, and time was irrelevant back down there, like it was a Bermuda Triangle. But then maybe he got so low that he could hear hell, and it made him go insane. That maybe time in the well was not like time outside the well, and he aged and went crazy because all he knew was whatever hell was saying in darkness. And when they brought him back up, he went through that time barrier again, and he was in real time. Now again, I said it was crazy. Now, apparently his condition never changed. He remained that way. And it is said that you can hear him screaming and laughing out of a window in the mental institution that he lives in. Now, I don't know if there's any validity to this story because I couldn't find the cemetery that this well is at. There were no names, and it didn't really specify the mental institution. So that's where the urban legend part comes in, where it could be a story that someone made up. It could be based on an actual real event and then grapevined and telephoned down to what it is now. Because I mentioned in previous stories or previous videos that urban legends are kind of like the game of telephone, where someone hears a story, tells it to a friend, and then it slowly trickles down, and then eventually that story either becomes different or gets built upon. So That's why I like this one, because this is kind of the epitome of what an urban legend is. But also, I believe in Bermuda Triangles. I believe that there are pockets of places in the world that are different than others, a different time, different way the world moves. Some would say different dimensions or different, like, parallel universes. I believe in that kind of thing. Of course, my logical brain is like, that's crazy, but the other part of me that it's more dominant doesn't understand how it couldn't be possible. That how could the world be so normal and not so magical? How can it just be this bubble of normal, I guess? I don't know how else to explain it. But I found this interesting. But also, side note, if your friend is like, hey, I dare you to go into this well, say no. Please say no. If you've ever seen a horror movie at all, this tells you to not do it. I don't care how cool you want to look. I don't care if your friends think you're a wimp. Just say no. Simple. My friend was like, get in that well. I'd be like, fuck you. Absolutely not. Unless you're paying me so much money that could potentially help with my mental issues afterwards. No. Or unless I fall in this well and then become Batman. Absolutely not. Alrighty, so there you go. Those are 4 of my favorite urban legends / spooky stories from Maine. I find it very interesting. Maine has a lot of really cool stories too, and a lot of really good food. I've always wanted to go there. I hear it's beautiful. I don't know how well anybody can go anywhere now with Rona going about, but it'd be really cool in the future if one day I can make a trip out there. Not just because of, like, Stephen King and the horror aspect, but just because, like I hear it's beautiful and a great place to live, despite the potential hurricanes, you know? But, yeah, I keep wanting to say things and then forgetting what I'm going to say. You can tell that I've been struggling. I look a mess. If you were to see my apartment, you'd be able to tell the state my brain has been in. But, I almost went to bed not making a video, and then almost was like, I don't need to make a video for Monday, it's fine. But then I was like, nah, make the video. You'll feel better about it tomorrow when you upload it. So, just do it. Because making videos actually is very cathartic for me and helps me feel better. I don't know if you could tell in the beginning of the video it was kind of a slow start, but now I feel a lot better. So that's good. And yeah. So if you are someone who likes urban legends or you have an urban legend to tell me, I have been getting comments on most of my urban legends videos, and I love hearing what people have to tell me. If someone wants me to do a specific state, let me know and I'll do that state. I actually have a list of all the states here, so I can do all 50. That's the goal, is to do all 50, and then we'll see where it goes from there. But yeah, so thank you for joining me in this video. If you liked it, go ahead and give it a thumbs up. If you're someone who likes these kinds of stories and other spooky things, go ahead and hit that subscribe button and hit the notification bell for whenever I post, because I try to post on Mondays. Sometimes it doesn't work out, but things are changing in my life, so I'm hoping that it does. If you have any video ideas for me, any ghost stories or anything like that, let me know, and I'd be more than happy to make them. And yeah, I'm gonna probably make some sleepy time tea, try to relax, and go to sleep. So let's hope for that. So thank you for joining me, and I hope that you have a wonderful day and a beautiful night. And this is Kat signing off.